Welcome and thank you very much for having accepted the invitation, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for the invitation and for welcoming here to do this presentation. I promise I will try to keep an eye on the time to not extend myself too much. So what I'm going to be presenting today is a paper that I finished writing about 2 weeks ago, so still very much in the process of finishing, and I'm looking forward to receiving any comments or feedback that you may have. So the paper is called The Affective Politicization of the Manosphere, Victimhood, Rage, and Digital Anti-Feminism. And I wanted to start off by signaling this show, which took over the media about 3 weeks ago since it's premiered. And actually, I was talking to Marta about this just now. So this show, Adolescents, I'm sorry, there won't be spoilers. What I'm about to tell you, you can get within the first 3 minutes. Sorry. Yes, I have my notes here in the presentation. I have to remember. So the show links the topics of violence, masculinity, and the manosphere, as it follows the life of the Miller family after discovering that the 13-year-old son has been accused of murdering his 13-year-old female colleague at school. The show isn't really about who done it or how he done it, because we know it was him, and the murder was captured in a security camera, so we know all of this. And again, this is not a spoiler, you get this within the first 5 minutes of the show. But it's more about focusing or exploring the social, cultural, and emotional sort of atmosphere or dimensions that have contributed to creating the context where this act of violence, of male violence, could have happened. And the media has really picked up on this sort of narrative that the show puts forward, and has inquired on, well, the emotional underpinnings of this violence. And I've put together some headlines from media. I think the first one here is from the Huffington Post, and it says, the Netflix Adolescents, shows the importance of emotional regulation in youth mental health. The Guardian says, adolescence has lessons for us all about alienated young men and the problem of disaffected youths. And in Spanish media, we have more of the same, where it is said, it is talked about the importance of going to therapy and how digital worlds can shape emotions and identities. Now, seeing the unfolding of this media narrative was fascinating to me, because it was highlighting one of the issues that I've been quite concerned about, or really interested about for years, which is emotions, manosphere, violence, masculinities, etc. So the sort of research questions that frame the paper that I'm presenting today is, what is the role of emotions in the manosphere? What political function do emotions serve in this context? And for those of you that might not be familiar with the term, the manosphere, I will get to giving you all a definition of it. But these are sort of the questions that guide me in this research process. And in trying to answer them, I am looking at the mobilization of a discourse of affect, of a discourse of emotion, the ways that emotions are talked about and expressed and capitalized upon in the manosphere, and how they may contribute to the politicization within these digital spaces. So this is the frame of the paper. I locate my work within the so-called affective turn in the social sciences from a feminist perspective. So in this theoretical framework, affect and emotions are understood as social and political forces that actively structure and may reproduce power relations. So this understanding really tries to move on from individual interpretations to conceptualize emotions as fundamentally bound up with discourse, therefore shaped and shaping the cultural and ideological frameworks in which they are reproduced and are mobilized. So emotions are not only personal, but are seen as relational and contextual as they emerge through and within social interactions. And in this, they help redefine and outline systems of inclusion and exclusion, therefore making them central in the dynamics of social life and also political life and political contestation itself. So in recent years, there's been a lot of work, a lot of interesting work on what is called as affective polarization. And I would like to say, because I think it can lead to some confusion, that I do not situate my work within the frame of affective polarization. Work that deals with this topic has a different theoretical understanding of emotions, and the object of study and the approach to it is quite different to mine. So in my work, I focus on how emotions weave a very specific process of politicization, not polarization. So my understanding of politicization is a process by which issues, identities, and experiences become matters of political concern, of political debate, and even political battle. So it's about bringing an issue into the realm of politics, therefore making it a topic that requires political attention and may even require political action. So in my work, I see how emotions are mobilized to politicize men's perceived grievances such as victimhood or rage, but we'll see this later on. So I'm looking at the ways that emotions or a discourse of emotions is helping politicize certain issues in the manosphere, and also inquiring into the social political possibilities that may open up through this affective politicization. So my theoretical framework draws onto work that has been done on affect theory from a feminist lens, specifically Sara Ahmed and her book, The Cultural Politics of Emotion, Rebecca Coleman and Jessica Ringrose's engagement with Deleuze theory on affect, Margaret Wetherell and her theorization around affect, emotion, and power, and lastly, Susanna Passonen, specifically, who has worked extensively on the digitality of affect and digital cultures. So I contextualize this paper and my broader work on the manosphere in general within the rise of an international conservative anti-gender and anti-feminist reaction, which in Spain has been sort of spearheaded this anti-gender movement through by Vox as a key reference in this context. Vox has really helped make mainstream anti-feminist political discourse and anti-feminist sentiments, constructing feminism as an enemy of men. So we see this rise of anti-feminist sentiments and discourse within the more traditional political sphere, which has coalesced with what Emma Jane coined as e-bile back in 2012, which it refers to the digital hatred and violence spewed against women, racialized people, and the LGBTQI community. So I like to put both the more traditional political realm within the digital realm as part of a continuum where anti-feminist sentiments are being reproduced and gaining more visibility and becoming more mainstream. I see these two fields as really engaging in sometimes collaboration and a dialogic relationship between them both. So now I can tell you what the manosphere is, because I feel like I've mentioned it 1,000 times already, but I haven't really explained what it is. And starting with the name, it comes from two different words being merged together. So it's man and sphere, which means manosphere. And when I refer to it, I mean a conglomerate of masculinist digital subcultures that are characterized by the use of misogynistic, self-victimizing discourses, also fueled by anti-feminist conspiracy theories. So why is it a masculinist digital subculture? Well, mainly for two reasons. Reason number one, across the manosphere, and we'll see in a second how diverse it is, there is this sentiment that there is a need to vindicate men's rights because they feel we're living in a context that is trying to take away men's rights. So this masculinist lens is articulated in a defense of men's rights. And also, the second reason why it's been described as masculinist is due to the fact that although there are some women that inhabit these spaces, it is largely a male-dominated subculture within the internet. So that's the reason why it's called masculinist. Now, I mentioned just a second ago that the manosphere is extremely diverse, and I think there is a tendency sometimes to think of the manosphere as largely the same sort of people that just reproduce the same discourse. And yes, there are similarities in terms of ideological positioning within the manosphere, but this is an extremely heterogeneous subcultural world within the internet. I've put up this list looking at literature and also looking at my prior work within the manosphere. And just as a quick disclaimer, this list is non-exhaustive, and I could never be exhaustive because we are looking at digital culture, which moves really fast, it transforms really fast, it evolves, and it disappears really fast. So this is the list now that makes sense, that is relevant. These subcultures we have identified, they're reproducing discourse, and they have some sort of relevancy within the manospheric world. But maybe in a couple of years, we have to review it and add some or delete some. So I'm going to give a very brief overview of each subculture. We have first the pickup artists, which are really dating coaches that give advice on how to get advice to men and how to get women. It may not sound that awful, but a lot of the times we see them reproducing quite predatory discourses on how to circumvent the negation of a woman to engage in sexual relationships with them using very coercive strategies. Second, we have Men Going Their Own Way, which is a very specific group that fantasizes about dislodging themselves from society because society is corrupted, it's against men, and they don't want to take part in it. We have also men's rights activists, which, although I'm located within the realm of the Manosphere, this group dates back all the way to the 60s as a response to the second wave of feminism. Of course, we have the involuntary celibate, which are the ones that attract the most attention, which is a group that, well, engages in quite nihilistic worldviews around their own situation in the world and how they are involuntary celibate because women won't have sex with them. And then we have anti-feminist YouTubers, which I think is quite specific to the Spanish context. I know that this doesn't resonate as much, or they're not as relevant in other countries, but in Spain we have quite a few of anti-feminist influencers that work within the platform of YouTube. And we also have specific platforms, because although I have talked about these groups that sort of mobilize around a shared identity, they also mobilize around a shared platform itself, not specifically about an identity. So we have the platform of Reddit, 4chan, which some people coin as the origins of the Manosphere, and the Spanish articulation of it would be Foro Coches, which is still very active. And then lastly, we have these two, for me, new additions to the list, which are the alpha and sigma males influencers on TikTok. So back when I started doing work in the Manosphere in 2021, TikTok wasn't such a relevant platform in Spain. But as it gathered more attention and more users, we started seeing Manosphere content sort of leaking into this platform and becoming relevant. And then we also have the tradwives, which took, I think, the Spanish media by surprise last year when the content from Ballerina Farm, an American Mormon tradwife, became very viral. And then we also started having our own articulations of tradwives in Spain, such as Roro, for example. So again, this is a very concise and non-exhaustive list of who inhabits the Manosphere. Now, what has been said about this topic? Although this is quite a recent field of study and very niche, it has been extremely productive. And there is literature on the Manosphere across the globe. We see it from different continents, different national and local contexts. But if I was to summarize what has been said in very specific points, I would say that the Manosphere has been theorized as a space for the restoration of a fractured masculinity that produces anti-feminist gender knowledge, which leads to generating authoritarian and patriarchal epistemologies, specifically around femininities, masculinities, and gender relations. It also articulates an anti-feminist discourse through the rhetoric of male victimhood, which we will see in a second, and how they disseminate this ideology. They develop specific digital practices or repurpose digital practices in order to reproduce their ideas, for example, meme making or gender trolling or shitposting for anti-feminist purposes. There is a variety of digital practices that are used or repurposed. And it lastly has also been thought as a space that can function as a pipeline for alt-right radicalization. So as you can see, there has been a lot of research on this topic, but work that pays attention to the affective or more emotional entanglements within the Manosphere is still very limited. And this is a gap in the literature that I'm aiming to address with this paper. So in terms of the methodological framework, stay with me with this one because it's a bit unorthodox, I guess. So I started the project of the Manosphere back in 2021 in a part of a larger project looking at mapping how the Spanish Manosphere worked. We knew about the existence of the American one, which is like the original one, and we were wondering if what the literature said about this the North American Manosphere made sense within our own national context. So we started our field work in 2021 and we implemented a digital ethnography as our main data collection method and analysis for the data method. And why did we choose digital ethnography? Well, looking at the literature, exploring the original Manosphere, digital ethnography was described as best suited to exploring not only the Manosphere itself, but also digital culture in broader terms, because it enables the observation of user-generated content, of real-life interaction as they evolve and are unfolded in digital realms. And it also allows the researcher to observe how people are shaped by digital spaces, but also shape these digital spaces themselves. So it's really the best method to provide an insight into how online communities work, how they evolve, the trends and the social cultural dynamics that develop therein. So we started going to the field and we looked at internet forums, different websites. We engaged with Facebook groups, Telegram channels. We watched a lot of YouTube videos and Twitch live streams, and we also started following Instagram and Twitter accounts. We were a team in total of 5 researchers, and we went to the field individually with our own fieldwork notebooks, which I have a couple of snippets in the next slide about what these notebooks look like. And then we...
Can I ask you something?
Yes.
Kind of feels relevant. Do you go with your own identity, or you create an identity to follow?
We created specific profiles, and then we just, because it also raises a lot of concerns about ethical safety, we then stopped using the fake profiles and we just looked at the data that was already available. That was not through a closed gaze firewall. But yeah, that is another topic of ethical issues dealing with online data. So then we got together using the triangulation strategy to check what each other had been collected, and implement this holistic and collective reflexive approach to try to analyze, make sense of the extreme complexity that we were finding in terms of the digital data collected. So we finished the field. The last day of the field work was March 2022, but from that moment onwards until now, I have been doing what Paulus argues is accidental ethnography. Accidental ethnography is a type of ethnographic work which is spontaneous, it is unplanned, because the field work has been folded into the normal life of the researcher. This results in data collection that is more reflexive, is more open, is less organized, and less structured. Accidental ethnography, Paulus argues, it allows the researcher to observe and reflect on the social dynamics, behaviors, and cultural practices in ways that challenge the way the traditional boundaries of how ethnographic work is conducted. And this happened because from 2022 onwards, what has happened in Spain specifically is the mainstreamization of Manosphere content. Suddenly, my field work, which I was able to turn off in the laptop on my phone after a day of work, it was completely inescapable for me. I was always immersed on some sort of Manosphere content or some sort of Manospheric ideas. Vox started using some of the terms that I had seen in very niche, specific online forums. So my field work became sort of the life that I had to navigate. This led to a continuous process of note revision. I went back to check what notes I had taken in 2021 to see if they still made sense. I re-engaged with my theoretical framework and I reinterpreted some of the early conceptualization that I had carried out. And this process, although it sounds quite terrible that in fact that I couldn't really escape this field, it really enabled me to see the evolution and the transformation of the field. And I believe this is what allowed me to also think about the emotional underpinnings and how the process of politicization might have been able to take place. So, yes, these are the sort of snippets. This is very early on field notes that I took. This is May 2021, June 2021. So what we used to do, we would log in what community or what platform we were researching, the times, dates, early interpretations or analysis, and of course all the screenshots that we could take. So from what is left of this presentation, I would like to present you with some actual data and some early theorizations. So the entire paper sort of is framed under the question of what moves men to inhabit these online spaces? What emotional attachments are there, or what emotional attachments do they create that keeps them in this space? And in order to answer the question, we have to start by the beginning, and the beginning is red pilling. So for those of you that might not be familiar with it, red pilling refers to taking the red pill, which refers to the movie The Matrix. So in the movie The Matrix, there is a scene where Neo, the main character, is presented with two options: taking the blue pill and continue to live in the simulation, happily ever after, nothing to see here, or take the red pill and awaken to the ugly truth that society has been controlled by robots and humans are enslaved to them. This metaphor, translated into the Manosphere, means awakening to the ugly truth that society has been corrupted by evil forces such as wokeism or feminism, and that men are extremely discriminated against and put in a subordinate position to women. So red pilling has a very ideological dimension, so the ideas about anti-feminism, etc., that it reproduces. But it is also an extremely affective process, as it involves the reevaluation of one's place in the world as a man. You get into the groups and now you are subordinate after, being fed the lies that you were the abuser, you are now the abused. And it also involves a reevaluation of the structures that shape social reality. And the process of red pilling is really shocking. It involves a moment of shock of the men that start to take it, and they also perceive it to be something extremely disruptive in their own lives, that they have to do something about this injustice. Red pilling is both collective and individual process, is mobilized in groups through shared narratives, but is something that has to be digested and processed individually. And red pilling really frames the entire process of affective politicization within the Manosphere. And in this affective politicization, I identify three main stages. First one being victimhood, the second one being rage and withdrawal, and the third one being political organization. So I'm going to briefly overview each of them. So the first stage of the affective politicization of the Manosphere is closely tied to the process of red pilling, as it occurs immediately after taking the red pill, following this affective and ideological awakening. So from this point, masculinity is constructed as wounded, as in a permanent stage of victimhood, in response to these societies that are hostile and unfair and structurally discriminatory against men. So I've included here some examples from data that I've been collecting. So in the first, I'm going to quickly translate briefly. In this comment, it says, there isn't a social group that suffers from more prejudice or is more discriminated against than men. In Spain, we have more than 500 laws against us that favor women over men. The double standard of feminism: if a woman is an addict, nymphomaniac, sex addict nymphomaniac is female empowerment, but if a man is the same, they're mentally ill and potentially an abuser. Feminist, no tienen perdón, I don't know how to translate this, they're inexcusable, they're evil, and they're resentful. So at this stage, and I'm sorry to not present you with more data, there's tons more, but obviously I'm time constrained. At this stage, we really start to see how victimhood narratives occupy a central role in the construction of the social and masculine imaginary. This victimhood is manifested, is reproduced both individually through the sharing of personal experiences, and we see a lot of men sharing their personal experiences with divorce, with custody battles, etc. And it is also done collectively, appealing to men as a group. So the collectivization of victimhood is key to generating emotional bonds that weave emotional support across communities and help foster this community sentiment and reinforcing a sense of belonging among the men in the Manosphere. These narratives tend to operate through the strategy of reversal of victimhood, where men are presented as wounded subjects, while feminism and women in general are portrayed as oppressive actors. So this role inversion really functions as a key political strategy that is charged with affective power, in the sense that it directly appeals to emotions in order to construct the perception that masculinity and men are under siege, and therefore they must be defended in the socio-political sphere. So moving on to this second stage of the affective politicization, it really starts when victimhood or this grievance feeling gives way to the surge of emotions of rage, of anger, of frustration. We have men who have been feeling, after taking the red pill, like the victims of this systemic discrimination, and they don't like it. They start to get angry about it. They want to do something about it. They are enraged about this unfairness. And we see this rage in these images. So, for example, this is fucking shameful. Oh my God, how annoying. When can we kick them out? In this other comment, the feminists, they just misusing public money. It's our money. And you can really see the affective intensity in the sense that they use capital letters. Normal size fun is not enough. And apart from rage, we also start seeing some fantasies about social withdrawal as a desirable outcome because society is too corrupted. For example, it's been 11 years since I've been alone. You only have to be a man to achieve this. Or I'm one of these lonely men. I'm 165. I'm balding. I have beer belly. It's been more than 1 year since I've had sex, and the last time I had it, it wasn't even that great. Alongside the social withdrawal fantasies, we also see some fantasies about cyborg women or inflatable women or AI-made women as a desirable outcome as well, to engage sexually with women, but in a way that they don't really have to take any emotional responsibility over them. So an inflatable woman would be more than these women. I am waiting to see if I can use a cyborg or AI where I can choose how they are and their physicality. Dreaming is free. So social rage, social withdrawal, and also sort of fake women fantasies populate this second stage. So at this point of the affective politicization, we see the articulation of discourses that mobilize rage and organize it for a political battle. And although I've only been able to put these comments, the reality is that the way that this discourse and these fantasies are mobilized, they're very different depending on which subculture we're dealing with. So, for example, pickup artists and Sigma and Alpha influences, they transform this discourse of rage into self-improvement narratives through this neoliberal rhetoric that portrays the self, meaning the men, as a project to keep on constantly improving and working on to achieve success, which is constructed through the accumulation of sex, money, and muscles. Now, this doesn't necessarily translate to incel subcultures, where this mobilization of rage is transformed into individual resentment towards society, but also towards women specifically. And this resentment may lead to the reproduction of some revenge fantasies, or even, as we saw, some synthetic women fantasies to, do with them as they like, because they're not real. So we can see the outlining of a clear anti-feminist and misogynistic and anti-women political ideology being sort of bubbling up. And the latter stage of the political organization, we start seeing clear political engagement, either by outwardly supporting specific parties, such as in the case of, obviously, the Spanish context Vox, or Se acabó la fiesta, SALF, but also through comments that applaud specific male influences for helping them become more political or become more politicized. So in this comment is posted to the to this video on YouTube, claiming to debunk feminism, and they're thanking this influencer for helping them open their eyes, reference to red pilling, and to bring this very important topic to the public attention. So what we're seeing is a process where feelings of victimhood and rage are being actively channeled into political organization. And I would like to just briefly comment on SALF, because I think it's a very paradigmatic case. So SALF is an electoral group that gained 3 MEPs in the latest European elections. And why do I consider it paradigmatic? Because the entire electoral campaign was conducted through social media exclusively. They did not do any traditional campaigning. They only used social media, which brings to the light this continuum between traditional politics and digital politics, but also the relevance of social media in terms of mobilizing electoral support and politicizing specific issues and men. So at this stage, we see a re-territorialization of the public and the political sphere through a distinctly masculinist lens, where male identities are and perceived loss of status are becoming politicized, therefore becoming central to political discourse itself. Now, this is interwoven with growing racist and transphobic rhetoric being disseminated that is also helping this politicization as ideas about male guardianship over women and the nation are tapped into. And this is something that has been growing. In 2021, I did not see that much rhetoric being reproduced, but in recent years, specifically from a couple years ago, this is becoming more and more central to Manosphere discourse. So within these spaces, narratives of proactive resistance and counter-revolutionary sentiment are starting to take hold. They're mobilizing men through defiance and political determination. And we saw this in some of these comments. And crucially, this isn't really happening in isolation. It's accompanied by the growth of a tightly knit digital communities that are built around emotional resonance. And what we're seeing is sort of a migration from more open Manospheric spaces to more closed ones. So platforms like Telegram channels that are shut, that you can't access, YouTube patrons that create specific communities around people within YouTube, WhatsApp groups, and other closed networks are becoming the central infrastructure for political mobilization. And as a researcher, you can't access these spaces because of ethical concerns. You just can't access it. So as a reflection, what these men, or what I'm seeing that binds these men together isn't just ideology, it is emotion, it is the affective dimension of it. Male fraternity forms not just around what they think, but what they feel together. And just to finish off with a couple reflections, what I'm seeing in the Manosphere is this space that is extremely effective, where male grievances are not only expressed, but are actively politicized. So here emotion isn't separate from politics, it is the political itself. A discourse of affect is being mobilized as a key tool for political action and political organization, transforming personal feelings of loss, of anger, of resentment into collective political purpose. So the emotional trajectory of the Manosphere, patterns of rage, of resentment, etc., or even belonging, is directly shaping political consciousness. It influences how ideological imaginaries are formed and how political participation is structured, often privileging emotional intensity, emotional discourse over traditional forms of engagement. So in this way, what we're seeing is a discourse of affect is becoming both the medium and the message in the political life of the Manosphere. And that's it.
Okay, thank you very much for this fascinating presentation. It's also challenging for us because we tend to use other research design. So I think it is important to have plurality, in the seminar, and to have people telling us about other different angles and ways of approaching things. I will say that given the topic, I will open the discussion, giving priority to all the young people that and early career researchers who I'm sure will have much more to say than the more seniors. So please go ahead, and then only if you don't have anything to say, or I will start giving.